Now on to more of the wide genre appeal of Daft Punk's influence. We're now talking about their influence on indie music, or particularly indie music in the latter part of the 2000s, because by that point indie music was going through an evolution. It had changed from the usual post-punk revival style that had been at the start of the decade and decided to add more electronic and electroclash elements into their sound, alongside more indie-leaning pop artists taking on more of a synth-pop sound, particularly in the likes of Robin and LaRue, with many reviews citing Robin's album Body Talk as having clear links to Daft Punk's more disco-based style. The influence of Daft Punk being further evident in two elements here. First, the fact that LCD Sound System have cited them as a huge influence on their work, to the extent where they even did a track called Daft Punk is Playing at My House, and the fact that the majority of artists from this new indie scene, often called New Rave, worked very closely with a lot of French house artists. Like on a Kitsune Maison indie compilation album, you'd have artists such as Block Party, Foals, Klaxons, and MGMT having their tracks remixed or working alongside artists like Justice, Alan Braque, or Etienne de Clichy, most evident on the track We Are Your Friends, which was a hugely successful collaboration between Justice and Simian Mobile Disco. Along with the fact that a lot of French indie emerged during this period, which was clearly heavily influenced by Daft Punk, specifically in the likes of Phoenix, who actually had one of their early 2000s tracks produced by a member of Daft Punk, and of course M83 with the heavy synth-pop influence. With Daft Punk's influence continuing to be firmly evident in French indie pop, even to this day, with the likes of L'Impératrice and Papoose, who are very new disco inspired, and Video Club, who are very synth-pop inspired. With some added indie and Daft Punk link factoids, they have also produced tracks and albums for the likes of Parcels and Arcade Fire, particularly on their album Everything Now. And also, how much more proof do you need of Daft Punk's influence on the indie of the later 2000s when you realise that both Julian Casablancas from The Strokes and Panda Bear from Animal Collective feature on their last album, Random Access Memories. But now to the final part of the long-standing influence and legacy of Daft Punk, their influence on contemporary pop music via their introduction of retro revivalism to contemporary chart music. When Get Lucky came out, it was a huge global smash, and it was a perfect tribute to the disco era. It put the sparkliness in the music video, the fact that they had licks and riffs played and written by Nile Rodgers, one of the most famous producers of the disco era, and even down to the album cover where it used the same font that was used on many disco albums. It basically, as we've discovered in the early 2000s, brought disco back into fashion in the 2010s, and then as a result, I noticed in the years following the release of Get Lucky, you started to get track after track that was based upon revivalism, bringing back the best and most nostalgic parts of the 70s and 80s, as if trying to recreate Get Lucky, as if trying to create Get Lucky Part 2. So we got tons of great tracks that came almost directly from the influence of Get Lucky. I doubt we'd have had the success or creation of Uptown Funk by Bruno Mars and Mark Ronson, or Redbone by Childish Gambino, or Can't Stop the Feeling by Justin Timberlake, without the influence of Daft Punk in bringing revivalism back into fashion. So it's weird that Daft Punk seemingly split up the year directly after the year where their influence was most felt in pop music, as there was a huge trend boom in revivalism. The most successful artist of 2020, The Weeknd, made a synthwave album, which was clearly down to the influence of Daft Punk, not only because The Weeknd had previously worked with French synthwave artists to produce and co-write tracks on his albums, such as Kavinsky on Kissland and Gesaffelstein on My Dear Melancholy, but the fact that The Weeknd had firmly worked with Daft Punk himself on the album Starboy, where they co-wrote and produced the tracks Starboy and I Feel It Coming. Also the fact that they clearly seemed to be the ones that turned him in this more firmly synthwave-leaning direction, which thoroughly influenced the sound of his latest album, After Hours. Then you have one of the other most successful albums of last year, Dua Lipa, where her whole Future Nostalgia album was thoroughly based around new disco, French house and revivalism, particularly on the track Don't Start Now, which is a good piece of 80s revivalism, as it uses some of the same licks and hooks from Need You Tonight by INXS, but so much so is the French house influence on that album, that on the remix album, a lot of the remixers were actual new disco and French house artists, including Jacques Decon, aka Le Rhythm Digital, and newer addition to the French house canon, Dimitri from Paris. You had a clear French house influence on the Lady Gaga album Chromatica, as evident in the hooks and licks on the track Rain on Me, which are extremely reminiscent of Daft Punk. A chill 70s funk style from the more recent albums and tracks from SZA and Doja Cat. Right throughout 2020, nearly every one of the biggest pop smash hits of that year can be firmly linked to new disco and synthwave, the styles that were firmly established and had their influence spread, all thanks to Daft Punk. Just as a little extra mention to their influence, for you hip-hop fans out there, yes, there is of course their work with Kanye West, not only them being sampled on the track Stronger, but the fact that they actually produced 4 of the tracks on his album Yeezus. I've just so wanted to make this video for so long because Daft Punk, one of my all-time favourite bands, just going right back to my childhood when I bought their best of album Musique 1993 to 2005, and I played it on repeat tons. Got so many like holiday nostalgic memories from it. It helped get me hugely into EDM culture to the extent where quite for a while I wanted to be a DJ for so long, and even took DJing lessons in high school. How they gave me my passion for the aesthetic and artistry of 90s music, particularly from seeing their music videos for their album Homework, perfectly capturing the hyper-creative, bizarre, but also stylish and director-led style that music videos had right throughout that MTV 90s period. And for just firmly shaping my music taste as well. If anything is new disco based, be it some current neo soul, some future funk, or just any great dance tracks I find, they have firmly shaped my music taste in that direction. So, for being a huge influence on my life and my music taste and my love for music, and for being a huge impact on music on the whole and for changing music for the better, I just want to say a huge thank you to Daft Punk. Thank you for the memories, thank you for your influence, and of course, thank you for the music. Au revoir, robots.